Uhuru. Uhuru. Thank you, brothers and sisters, comrades. Thank you very much. Let me express my appreciation to all of you for coming out. Zay, it's good to see you and your son. Thank you for coming out. I want to say that part of what this is about is organizing for a mobilization, a march that we want to do here in this city. We think it's important to join with all of the people who around this country are mobilizing to show the outrage around this case with Trayvon. One brother asked during this meeting, what can we do to keep this kind of thing from happening in St. Petersburg in terms of how the state simply united with Zimmerman in so many ways by not arresting him, etc. Well, one thing we can do is to show our outrage, is to build this mobilization here in this city, to show that there is a population here that is outraged by what happened and that we won't tolerate that happening in this city of St. Petersburg. I think that's one of the things that we can do, one of the things that we have to do. Another thing that I hope has been coming through in this discussion is that we're not just talking about having another meeting, another rally to express outrage for the sake of being outraged. All around this country, Washington, D.C., New York, various places, Sanford itself, you know, people are organizing to express their outrage around this. But after that, what? The reality is that every time we look up, we treat each of these incidents as new and separate kinds of incidents. We treat this as if it is isolated from every other part of the reality that black people experience here in this country and if the truth be told, around the world. We're dealing with this kind of case right now in Germany. There's a whole mobilization about murder by the state, the German state, you know, burning African to death while I've got him chained to a mattress in jail. Every place we look, as black people, we are faced with this kind of situation. I am 70 years old. And as a child, my mother, when disciplining me, would say, I'm going to beat it out of you before the white man gets you. Because it was understood to be a black male in America was to face the kind of treatment that Trayvon Martin just faced, and traditionally it happens with impunity. That is to say that white people, it was known that white people killed black men and didn't have to pay any price for it. Nothing would happen to them. Now, people are demanding that Zimmerman be arrested. Zimmerman is going to be arrested. He's going to be arrested. They don't have a choice but to arrest him after the massive mobilizations that's been happening. To not arrest Zimmerman is to expose the system for what it is. And rather than have the system exposed, they have to arrest Zimmerman. You see, they could get along, they could get around it if nobody knew about it. If there was not this response, if Zimmerman had just killed Trayvon, and it wouldn't have done anything, wouldn't have had this outrage expressed around, he would walk. But he's not going to walk now. He's going to have to go to jail, because if he doesn't go to jail, it's going to tell us that what side the state is really on, and they can't stand that kind of exposure. So they're going to sacrifice Zimmerman in this instance. But I really think it's important for us to understand that if you want to understand phenomenon, see, you can't just treat this as a simple incident. You have to, in order to understand the phenomenon, you have to look at it. You have to look at the history of the phenomenon, right? How it came into being in order to understand what it means right now. If, in fact, this thing that happened with Trayvon was unusual, we wouldn't even be outraged. We know something's going to happen, you know, etc. But the fact is, it happens all the time, like everybody's saying. This is the one today. What is it going to be next week, and the next month, and the next month? Because there always is going to be a Trayvon as long as we have this particular relationship to the system that we have now. So how did this relationship start? You know, because people talk about the question that Zimmerman, you know, I've seen some discussion that Zimmerman is really not white. he's what they have defined as Hispanic, whatever the hell that means. And I say it like that because a lot of people who I know, Mexicans in particular, hate that term. That's a term that's used for all Spanish-speaking people. But the Mexicans are quick to tell you, I am not Hispanic, I am not Spanish. Spain is white. It's a white country. There are more people who speak Spanish than there around the world than exist in Spain today. Spain, people speak Spanish in all these other places, but why? Because Spain was a colonizer. Spain was a slave-owning, colonizing country that colonized people around the world. So they reject this concept of Hispanic. And so, you know, they say, well, Zimmerman was not white, he was Hispanic, whatever that means, right? But we know that the question is a little more complex than that, don't we? We know that it's not just like that. That race itself is a political construct. It's a political construct. It's something that somebody came up, even the white people are not white people. I never saw a white person. I've seen some pink people, but I've never seen a white person. Race itself is a political construct. And it has a particular meaning in the world given to it by the white people, quote unquote, who have dominated the world and defined themselves in relationship to everybody else in the world. That's where whiteness was born. Black people didn't invent white people. It was the sign of purity as opposed to evil and demons from the rest of us. And so this was a self-designation of whiteness. So, and even when we talk about the white people this and white people that, you know, I've got cousins and friends and relatives who weren't black, quote unquote, you know, because their cousin, you know, my cousin is Indian on my mother's side, you understand? Or because being black carried with it not only stigma, but serious problems, punishment. So people didn't want to be black. Even black people looking in the mirror at their black selves tried to be something other than black because of the punishment that came with being black. So we became all these other things. Not only that, what we call race and racism is the ideological underpinning of a social system born of slavery and genocide. It is the thing that holds the system together. You know, like people say, well, did you have to, why do all of these people cooperate in a certain way? They didn't have to have a meeting. There's a philosophy, an ideology that is born of a particular relationship, and I want to talk about that. And I'm talking passionately now, but I don't intend for my passion, or I hope that my passion is not something that is seen as a substitute for a scientific expression of this reality, of this relationship that we have, because that's what I'm fighting for. Because it doesn't serve us just to run around talking about the white people this and the black people that, or as I saw one organization say they got a $10,000 bounty on Zimmerman, you know, so what? You know, so what? What does it mean in the world? What does it mean that we have a demonstration over here, a demonstration over there? How do we understand this reality, and what do we do about it based on that understanding? That's the struggle that we're involved in. So, first of all, just to start from the beginning, and I want to do that because a lot of this is mystified. African people in this country are the only people other than the indigenous people who are called Indians who did not come to this country looking for a better way of life. We lost a better way of life as a consequence of coming here. African people in this country are not a people who came here because 400 years ago somebody sitting under a tree in Angola said, you know what? A few hundred years from now, somebody in this land that they now call America is going to invent the NBA. Let's leave now and get a jump on it, right? So when they invent it, we'll be in place to play basketball. Didn't happen that way. People like to refer to this country as a so-called nation of immigrants. But even that is something that obscures a fundamental reality. African people are not immigrants, we are captives. That's how we got here, as captives, captives, captives. And I think it's really important for us to understand that, because Trayvon's his future was determined a few hundred years ago. It wasn't determined in February, it was determined a few hundred years ago when somebody took from us our right to be a self-determining people, standing on our own people's feet, making our own decisions in our own interests. You gotta get to the foundation of the problem. Otherwise, you'll do this over and over and over and over. Just keep doing it, because there is going to be another Trayvon. There is another Trayvon right now happening someplace. I think it's really important for us to understand that. So you look at the world. Growing up, I had to look at the world and see everywhere I looked. When I looked at somebody who looked like me, we were poor, we were oppressed, violence everywhere, all around us, ignorance imposed in our lives, on the one hand. But then when I looked at where white people lived, they had everything. They were wealthy, they were well off, while we were poor and starving. I had to ask myself the question of, why is this reality? Why is it that every place I look, black people are poor, starving, and white people are well off? It's just an objective reality that I had to contend with, had to deal with. I had to ask the question. And the answer that I got in every instance was that black people suffer the way we do because we are less civilized than white people. White people are civilized, are thrifty, they save their money, they work really hard, they got it the old-fashioned way. Isn't that the story? That's what we were told. And if they didn't say it directly, they said it indirectly. Because if they didn't say the reason you are poor and white people in general are rich is because you were kidnapped, your land was taken away from you, your culture was taken away from you, and you were forced to work for more than 200 years for nothing. That's an objective material reality. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not talking, I'm passionate about it, but the passion should not obscure this objective truth that I want us to deal with right now. So here you have it. It's more than that. Because we get fed all kind of pablum that they call history. Fantasies, nonsense, garbage that undermine our sense of human dignity as a people, that has us filled with all kinds of self-hatred and self-doubt about our capacity as a people. Everything that we see does that to us. You go to school and you learn about queen this and king that, etc. But you don't know anything about yourself, about your black self. And here is the reality that we are talking about right now. It's the reality that was constructed of the fact that between 4 short years of 1347 and 1351, half the white people on the planet Earth died. Between 1347 and 1351, is that 4 years? At least half the white people on the planet Earth died of plague. They call it the Black Plague. And we just lucky that OJ wasn't alive, because they would have blamed it on him. Right? Now, I'm mentioning this. And listen, this was a very serious historical moment, because people died, cows, horses, dogs died, and even the Pope wasn't sure that this special relationship he's supposed to have with the heavens would protect him. He got out of the city and found some countryside where nobody else could be around him to try to stay alive. It was serious. But the reason I mention this is because of the fantasies that we get taught all the time. When we were taught that Europeans suffering from a surplus of civilization and Christianity, set out in the world to share it with everybody else. Say, they didn't want to do it, but it was the white man's burden. They had to do it. And that we were taught that they set out. That's why they went to Africa, to bring us Christianity. That's why they came to the Americas, to bring to the savage Indians Christianity and civilization, we were told. But the truth of the matter is that if you have half of a population dying in 4 years, you know that you cannot have a viable political economy. Don't you know that? If half the people die in 4 years, you ain't got no economy. You know, and then over the next 100 years or so, they're still suffering from that and other plagues. So what rescued Europe from that place of starvation, disease, poverty? What rescued Europe? This place that was known at that time in the world, not as Europe. Europe didn't even exist. There was no such thing as Europe at that time. No such thing as the white man at that time. What was it that rescued this population? It was slavery and colonialism. It was the fact that Europe set out and began to rape and pillage the rest of the world, to do to the rest of the world what had been up to that time confined to what was happening within Europe itself. Europe was known as this place of warring tribes, always at each other's throats, etc. That where people defined themselves primarily in relationship to each other. Was no European nation, was no white man. What gave birth to Europe, the consciousness and the concept of Europe and the white man, was slavery in the first place. And then after that, colonization. And it was the capture of African people that brought in more wealth. It was the theft of this land that we're standing on now and all of South America that changed the face of the world. That's what made Europe rich, where it was before poor and starving. That's what made Europe. Europe had no freedom. They lived under what they call feudalism at that time. When we met Europeans, they were living under feudalism. What is feudalism? It's the next closest thing to slavery. It wasn't slavery where they were selling each other, but they were the people who lived there were tied to the land. If the landlord sold the land, they went with the land. That's where the concept of the landlord comes from that period in time in European history. So they had no freedom. Only ones with freedom was the nobility. They did what we came up calling sharecropping, the majority of the people. They worked part of the time, they got a little of what they produced, but the majority of it went to the landlords. That's where the myth of Robin Hood comes from. Robbing from the rich to give to the poor. The sheriff oppressed everybody in order to keep extracting value. I'm telling you, this is the relationship that we have to understand. When we met Europe, and the reason I'm mentioning it is because we get fed all this nonsense. We were told that Europeans came and rescued us from barbarism and savagery and brought us Christianity, and that if it wasn't for Tarzan, we'd be all in trouble. And it's nonsense, because the truth is that we had magnificent civilization. We were building pyramids and had indoor toilets before Europe knew how to master fire. That's just an objective reality that we're talking about. And the reason it is important is because if they take away from you your knowledge of yourself, your understanding of yourself, your place in history, then they can write anything they want on that black slate and make you think about yourself in ways that hurt you as opposed to help you. You don't have your own identity. You have an identity that somebody imposed on you. Somebody opened up your brain and said, think this, nigga. You understand? So the struggle that we're involved in has its origin in these kinds of relationships that brought up a whole social system. That's how capitalism, that's where it came from. People talking about capitalism this and capitalism that. Well, if capitalism was so wonderful, then tell me why in the hell Is it a place where more than half the people on earth live off less than $2.50 a day? If capitalism is so wonderful. If capitalism is so wonderful, then tell me why 70% of the people on the earth live off less than $10 a day. Because the fundamental feature of capitalism is parasitism. And that's how capitalism was born, as a parasite. It's a bloodsucker. It's like a tapeworm that is entered into the body of humanity, sucking its intestines, sucking all the resources that people create. So no matter how hard people work, whether they're in Afghanistan, Pakistan, whether they're in Palestine, whether they're in Ghana, whether they're throughout Africa, in the Caribbean, or in Southside St. Petersburg, no matter how hard they work, they never get a damn thing. And the only one who benefits from that is the damn tapeworm. The tapeworm doesn't do a bit of work. It doesn't work at all. It just gets bigger and bigger off the work that everybody else does. That's a nasty social system. But not only do you have that, when you have a parasitic economy, a world economy, you got a parasitic philosophy. You got a parasitic intellectual body. Everything functions off of this whole parasitic relationship. Parasitism. Parasitism is the fact that they say they give you Social Security at 65, when African men, the average die at 62. That's a damn parasite. That means I pay Social Security not for me, but for somebody else. Parasitism is the Beatles and Elvis Presley, while people like Charles Brown and James Brown and other persons who created the music that we are talking about die in obscurity and sometimes in starvation. It comes in all forms, this parasitism. The legal system is based on parasitism. You think I made it up? Listen, what is this old cliche that they have about in the law? They said that possession is 99%. Isn't that what they say? Don't say where you got it from, but if you got it, that's 99% of the law. Why would you have to have a cliche like that to represent the law? Because the majority of what the system has, it got it from taken from somebody else. That's why they even come up with the concept Indian giver. Now you want it back. Hell, the Indians didn't give it to you in the first place. So you're damn right they want it back, and I want it back for them. So, in order to have an unjust system such as this, in order to have a system that lives off other people, in order to have a system where the people who work, who have to produce, and production happens socially, doesn't it? You have to come together to produce. So you got social production on the one hand, but the people who produce don't own anything. You got socialized production, and you got private ownership. I ain't talking about your house. I'm talking about the methods, the means that's used to produce everything that we need to survive with. All of us have to come together to produce everything. When I say all of us, I don't mean just the people in this city, just the people in this room. I'm talking about all over the world. People participate in producing what's necessary. Even though we do that, what is produced is owned by just a handful of people who don't do a damn bit of work at all. They'll never work, never see sweat on their brow, unless it's trying to get out of the way of a worker. You understand? So that's a profound contradiction that we are confronted with in this world. So you have laws, you have customs, and everything that validate this kind of social system. And then when it comes to African people, who are the foundation of the system, because the foundation of capitalism is black people, slavery, the whole slave trade, turning our national homeland, Africa, into a whole continent, 12 million square miles of wealth, richness. But the whole continent was turned into a place for the purpose of breeding slaves, breeding black people into slavery. And then in 1884 and 85, they had a conference. The Pope, not the Pope, but in Berlin, Germany, where like mafioso, they got together and they divided Africa. And all these are places that they call different countries in Africa. White people made them up. And so what we have now, there used to be one continent. Now you got 54 so-called states in Africa. And they put Uncle Toms in charge of every one of them. And when there wasn't an Uncle Tom, they murdered them, like they murdered Lumumba, like they overthrew Nkrumah, like they killed Thomas Sankara. Like every time a leader comes that tries to take our people to our freedom, they come and crush them down. And then they buy off these old Uncle Toms and tell you that Uncle Chicken Bone or somebody like that is our real leader. Isn't that what they do? They killed Malcolm X. Just as sure I'm standing right here. Malcolm told us to stand strong and to do for yourself. They got rid of the FBI, integrated by putting the first Negro that joined the FBI, joined it to destroy Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey said, "Up, you mighty race, you can do what you want." He says, "Africa for Africans, those at home and those abroad." And they got rid of him. They killed King because King tried to lead a movement against this kind of system. You remember what King's last movement, his last action was supposed to be, don't you? It was the Poor People's March, where they were going to go into Washington, D.C. and shut it down. That's what King said that he was going to do. And instead, they shut him down. So every time we produce any real leaders, they try to destroy them and leave us in the hands of those chicken-eating preachers. Yes, I'm talking about them. I'm talking about you. Whenever you ever seen a situation where somebody wants to understand the political situation in the world, they go ask a preacher. They say, your community. They want to ask your preachers because they own that Negro from top to bottom. When have you ever seen a situation, somebody want to understand the situation in the world, they go ask an entertainer or somebody in the sports arena, except your community. But people who've dedicated their lives to changing these circumstances, they don't want to know. Understand? They demonize. They get demonized us. So let's talk about Trayvon. Because Trayvon was just one of the latest to fall. In this city, Brother Zay mentioned, you got to go out and vote, etc., etc., etc. Well, that's up to you. Depends on whether there's anything to vote for. Most times there's not. That's just the truth. That's just the truth. Y'all voted for this Negro here that y'all thought was going to make a difference. This Negro can't even talk bad about the police. Y'all remember that? I mean, Goliath Davis apparently had more power than the President of the United States. Goliath Davis, when he came here, off of your motion, off of the strength of this community, because when they killed Tyrone Lewis, in 1996, this community rose up in such a furor, and it made them pay a consequence. And part of the consequence that they paid was that they tried to get around it. They got a Negro police chief. They thought they could use white power in blackface to calm it down. But when Goliath Davis became the chief of police, what did he say? He said, "I unite with you Uhurus." He said, "What we need is economic development and the end to police containment." That's what he said. And then off of that, we went for 8 years in the city of St. Petersburg without a single cop killing a black person here. It wasn't the vote that did it. It was the masses in motion that overturned this system and said, "You'll pay a price for it." That's what did it. It was the people. The power of the people made the difference. 8 years. There's Tyrone Lewis' sister sitting in the back next to that reporter from the St. Petersburg Times. That family is a scar still on that family. Here's a sister, here's a cousin of Trayvon. Here's the stepmother of Javon Dawson, who was murdered at 17 years old at a graduation party in this city. And we want to tell us that Trayvon, the thing is Trayvon, it's a history. It's a relationship that we have with a system that must be overturned. Must be overturned. Must be overturned. Must be. It ain't enough. It ain't enough to fire Zimmerman. Zimmerman can only play a role of the scapegoat. Look at this. I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. You saw this guy that they said in Afghanistan went and killed 17 people, they said. 17, just wiped them out, murdered them, stacked them up and set them on fire, did all kinds of horrible things to them. Government said, oh, that's bad. Obama said, I apologize. You understand? Everybody, oh, that's terrible. Look at what he did. And they're going to give that fellow some time. You understand? But they do that to obscure the real deal. Because that fella didn't charter an airplane and then decide to go to Afghanistan and start killing people, right? He is a part of an invasion and occupation where they murder people every damn day, all the time. So, by dealing with him harshly, then they exonerate what the rest of them are doing all the time, every day. There is no legality to anything that they're doing there. You understand what I'm saying? There's no morality at all there. Whether by Bales, is that his name, Bales? Or any other ones of them. Same thing is true with Zimmerman. That's why when Zimmerman killed this boy, the state didn't move at all. Say, no, we didn't arrest him. Didn't put him in jail. Didn't do anything. And now they're concocting stories. The woman, his girlfriend was on the phone with him just a minute before. He said, somebody's following me. She said, run. She said, no, I'm not going to run. I'm just going to walk fast. And now, he's dead, and this guy doesn't spend a moment in jail. We live in a community everywhere because they cannot contain a community that's oppressed like this. You know, people won't accept this lying down. Nobody's just going to live like this. They take away all, they don't take away all your options. What they do is create a situation where you only have bad options. You know, you live in a capitalist system, so you got to have some money. You got to have money if you live in a capitalist system because that's what it's based on. It's a system that's based on profit and nothing else but profit. It's a system that doesn't create doctors and hospitals for sick people. It creates doctors and hospitals for profit. You can be as sick as you want to be if you ain't got no money. If you're one of the 50 million people who don't have insurance in this country, you put your butt in one of those hospitals there and see if the police won't have you out of there, make you sicker than you were when you got there. But if you got money, you don't even have to be sick. You can call it up just like you call the Hilton and make and reserve a room. Because everything here is based on profit. They don't make cars because people need to get from one place to the other. They make it for profit. Everything is produced for the purpose of making money. That's the kind of system that we live with. That's the kind of system that we're trapped in at this moment. So if you say that everything is based on profit, you got to have money. And then you, on the other hand, you deny our people the ability to make money. You deny a whole community an opportunity to make money. They said, well, ain't no unemployment is high. Hell, there was full employment under slavery. Everybody had a damn job. It only got tricky once you had to pay us for it. You understand what I'm saying? So now ain't no jobs. So how they supposed to live? How are people supposed to live? So you say ain't no jobs, they keep us out of the legal economy, and then all of a sudden, quite mysteriously, some product that somebody had to go to a laboratory to create, it ain't even cocaine. It's a byproduct of cocaine. It's a derivative of cocaine. It's something that's created in a laboratory by people with white smocks and big degrees and what have you. And we are now finding this crack cocaine. Where is it located? We are told that the cocaine drug kingpins are in the housing projects in the black community. The same young people who they say can't do math, the same young people who they say can't be educated are now creating laboratories, creating crack cocaine. And not only are we creating crack cocaine, We've got distribution centers all over the country. We open up the port of Tampa, the port of Oakland, the port of San Francisco, and all these other places bringing drugs in here. You believe that, don't you? I got a bridge I want to sell you if you do. So they create this situation. Then, because they keep us under constant pressure, under constant terror, then they create this situation that we can call a voluntary tax from the community. So from the poorest section of the population, people are now, how do you pay your rent man? The rent man get paid dope money. Phone girl get paid dope money. All the money people get dope money. Who's got the money? It's in the stock markets. It's in the auto industry and what have you. I saw something once that said that they looked at the money in this country, that almost all the money in this country had cocaine, was tainted with cocaine. And the St. Petersburg Times, one time I think it wrote a truthful article. And it said something like, the cocaine was so influential in the economy of the state of Florida that if you took cocaine out of the economy, that the economy would drop into the sea. That's how much it was in. And you want to tell me that some Negroes in the housing project, some kids are doing that? Hell no. And then they create these situations. What does it mean for our communities? It means all kinds of destabilization, instability, people who are running trying to get their next hit, their next fix, people who turn against their own family members to try to get a next hit. All kinds of disruption in our community. And you can't make a revolution if every 12 minutes you're trying to say, where am I going to get my next hit? You can't make a revolution if you're afraid of your own neighbor, your own brother, your own sister, your own cousin. They put that stuff in our communities. And then when they do it, they criminalize us. You read the newspaper, you see crack babies, crack mothers, crack this and crack that. But you can't read about what the police are doing to our communities. So you come up with your perception of yourself that's created by them. That does not have your interests at heart. So we got to get organized. Let's build a different kind of mobilization here in St. Petersburg around Trayvon. Let's take the cover off the whole damn social system. Let's take the cover off the whole social system. And we want everybody to be a part of this. Because the truth is that all peoples in this country owe their exploitation or their level of discomfort in the social system to the oppression of Africans. If you're a white man who works someplace and you catching hell, it's because of what happens to black people. Because the fundamental contradictions in the world is the contradictions between oppressed and oppressor nations. All the other contradictions revolve around those contradictions. If you're a white woman and get oppressed, etc., it's white power that's doing that to you. Just like it's doing it to the African workers, it's white power that's doing that to you. You got to be opposed to it, and you got to join with a revolutionary struggle to overturn this social system where there are slaves and slave masters and bosses and workers. We don't need that kind of system anymore. That's what we stand for. We're not just standing for stopping one incident, arresting one guy. We believe it's possible for there to be a different kind of world. That's what we are fighting for, a different kind of world. That's why I went to this long, convoluted presentation with you. Because there are people who play us cheap. They say the workers cannot understand political economy. I said, that's a lie. They say the workers cannot understand social science. I said, that's a lie. They can understand this nonsense you preach because you do more to obfuscate than you do to expose. We believe that everybody can understand it. And what we're saying is African people and all oppressed people in the world, first of all, is the world has changed. You don't even have to be one of those persons who go to crystal balls and things like that and read these cards to know that the world has changed. It's never going to be the same anymore. Everybody all around the world is rising up, from Venezuela and Hugo Chavez to what you see happening in Palestine and various other places. The world is changing. And so it is our time to be a part of this changing world. It's everybody's time to be a part of this changing world who want to be on the right side of history. We cannot live anymore like it's slavery time. The African people are not going to be these shuffling people who just go along with everything just because you say it. I'm going to wear my damn hoodie. If I want to, I'm going to wear my pants sagging. If I want to, I'm going to do whatever the hell it is that makes us feel good as a people. That shouldn't make you uncomfortable. Hell, you were sagging before I started. I ain't saying nothing. That's the first time I saw sagging. You know? And so you can't make those kinds of judgments and tell us that we got to act a certain way to get permit to be approved. It's the slave master that has to win approval. It's the children of the slave master who have to win approval, not the slave. And I want to say finally, and I'm going to stop. In some ways, it's easy to support the case of Trayvon Martin. Barack Obama said that if he had a son, he'd look like Trayvon Martin. And it's probably true. We know what he meant when he said that, don't we? We know what he meant when he said that, don't we? Yeah, he looked like Trayvon Martin. But there are a whole bunch of black people who don't look nothing like Trayvon. Don't look nothing like Obama. So why is that the significant factor? Trayvon is easy because he is easy to point as the victim. Just a black guy walking down with Skittles and an iced tea, you know, and gunned down. That's so easy to deal with. But Nicholas Lindsay is a different story. We live under occupation in this community. I have seen with my very eyes. Police, 8 carloads of police stopped one young African down the street here, they say, for running a stop sign on 18th Avenue down there. There is no stop sign on 18th Avenue. Do you understand what I'm saying? There is not a single, 8 carloads. I've seen this brother here and this woman here driving from our gym to this place right here, get stopped by fatigue-wearing, black uniformed cops. Because they first, when they got there, said, well, who was driving? Were you driving? Asking him. He was the passenger. And the thing is, there was this white woman with this African. And driving through what they have designated as some kind of drug thing, we guess. And so they spot them, and then they pull up at the Uhuru house. They know they have made a mistake. Right? And so they say, well, you weren't wearing your seatbelt. They didn't even know who was driving, but they said he wasn't wearing the seatbelt. And they said, you ran a stop sign way back there somewhere. This is a regular occasion in our community. Under the color of law, they do these things. Brother came here and said the cops followed him for 26 blocks. Pull up into his house. He got to his driveway, sitting in his car, talking on the phone. The cops come up and say, sir, would you mind getting out of the car? He gets out of the car, and then he clicks the car lock. They said, well, would you mind opening your car and let us search it? No, you can't search my car. Not unless you got a warrant, you can't search my car. So then they got rough. The man's children are there in the door watching. His wife is there in the door watching. They grab the man, you understand? And then they tussle him down, handcuff him, and go in his pocket and take his keys out and open the door to search for drugs. There's no drugs in the car. You see what I'm saying? But under the color of law, because they've got this thing that if they stop you for a traffic offense, that validates them being able to search you and search your car. So they just stopping people all over our community for the purpose of doing that. Under color of law, they're doing these offenses in our community. When you read about what happened with Hydra Lacey, what was that? January 24th? Hydra Lacey. They told us that Hydra Lacey was some crazed giant who, when the cops came there, you know, he just ambushed them and killed them. Then later on, you read some of the transcripts from the grand jury report, and they said that Hydra Lacey had said, I give up, and that he was being handcuffed, and while he was being handcuffed, they tasered him several times. That's how the cop died with Hydra Lacey. Then you get the mayor. The mayor comes out to the community, presides over the assault on the house where Hydra Lacey was. And then after they killed Hydra Lacey, tell them to bulldoze the house, and then they loaded up all of the house on trucks and took it away. That's called destroying evidence. Who destroys evidence except a criminal who does not want to be caught up for what he did? You know? Why would they have a federal marshal coming to get Hydro Lacy for a domestic issue? Why would they have Homeland Security in your community? You don't see Homeland Community in their community. And then, when the cop died, the other cop died less than a month later on February 21st, the anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X. You wonder why the kid shot? When the reality in our community, when they shot Jay, what's his name? Who was laying on his bed, on the sofa. Jarrell Walker. The cop just stood over him and shot him in the back while he's laying on his sofa with a child in the back room. You wonder why this 16-year-old kid who didn't have a future at all, they just gave him life, but he didn't have a future. He had already been given life. We live as an occupied community because you cannot keep a people in this condition without the most severe kind of police repression. Let's build a moment. How many people here are going to march on Saturday? Let me see your hand. Oh, well, good, good. I wish everybody was going to march, but tell everybody else too. Let's have a real march. It's going to be nonviolent, y'all, unless Zimmerman shows up and starts shooting. We mad as hell, but we ain't crazy, right? We mad as hell, but we ain't crazy. We ain't having no march to go down there and do anything insane. But if you want to stand on the right side, then march with us. Because you don't have to be black to stand up for the rights of black people. You don't have to be black to stand opposed to white power that's destroyed most of the world. You know? So we want people to come out with us. Let's have a magnificent mobilization. And then let's show them why they call the city of St. Petersburg the city of African resistance. Uhuru.